Hello, I'm Murmur, and welcome to my YouTube channel that will more than likely go absolutely nowhere, but for the time being, I thought it might be fun to talk about my hobbies to a camera, and maybe a few people here and there will listen. I don't know, it might be therapeutic or something. The idea I currently have for this channel, which could certainly change or develop or whatnot, is basically just talking about movies and some other things I'm interested in. The first quote-unquote series I'd like to try out is a sort of director retrospective type thing, in which I take a look at some of the movies of various directors. I'll try to cover around 5 movies in each video because I don't want them to be too ridiculously long. Minimum 3, maximum 7, let's say. I also do individual reviews and maybe some double features or something. I'm an obsessive list maker, so expect some of those. Some disclaimers. Pretty much everything I say will be entirely subjective. For future reference, lists will be based on personal preference and taste rather than any sort of objective standard. I do have a few unpopular opinions, hot takes, and so forth, so if you disagree, I'm glad. Intellectual diversity or whatever. The production value on these is going to be pretty poor. I don't currently see myself investing too much time or money into this experiment, but hey, you never know. Maybe it'll take off, which isn't likely, or maybe I'll just really enjoy it and gain enough motivation to spend some time and money on it. Also, there will generally be spoilers in these videos. I won't give away like major reveals or twists or anything without fair warning, but if it happens in the first half of the movie, or if I don't think it's all that spoilery, I'm going to be giving away plot points. With all that nonsense out of the way, let's real quick get into my first entry in this director retrospective series. I think for my first video, it would be appropriate to discuss my personal favorite filmmaker, the quintessential American director, David Lynch. I've seen all of his feature films, his TV shows of course, and many of his short films, but there's still quite a few to go. Today I will be talking about 5 of his 10 feature films. There won't be any order, I'm not going chronologically or anything, and I don't plan to in the future. It may seem arbitrary, but I do sort of have a method going on. So first up, Lost Highway, which is a personal favorite film of mine, but compared to the rest of Lynch's filmography, this is mid-tier, which should give you an idea of how much of a Lynch fan I am. Anyway, Lost Highway is part of an unofficial trilogy of Lynch's, the LA trilogy. 3 similarly constructed films that all take place in Los Angeles, made consecutively over the span of 10 years. I don't know if the trilogy was intentional, but this would be the first entry. And it's an absolute masterpiece, but still my least favorite of the 3. There's a lot going on in this film, and if you haven't seen it, I suggest you check it out for your own good. I'll go over it very generally. We follow Bill Pullman playing LA native and renowned saxophonist Fred Madison and his wife Renee, played by the somehow both underrated and overrated Patricia Arquette. They're receiving these very ominous and almost threatening VHS tapes of images of their own house, which I've always thought was a very disturbing idea, kind of like in Haneke's Cache. But yeah, some stuff goes down. Robert Blake shows up as the mystery man at a party in easily the highlight of the film and an absolutely terrifying scene. I'll show you a little bit of it.
We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so. Where was it you think we met?
At your house, don't you remember?
No, I don't. Are you sure?
Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
What do you mean you're where right now?
At your house.
It's seriously a contender for one of the best directed scenes of all time in my opinion, and certainly one of the most unsettling. So yeah, more creepy and mysterious stuff goes down as we continue to follow Fred, who is arrested for his wife's murder, and oh, now we're following this other kid, Pete, played by Balthazar Getty, who seems to have inexplicably switched places with Fred, and then Robert Loggia, aka Future LaManna, shows up.
I said, my nephew has this area, Gary LaManna.
Oh, fuck off, huh? But I'm busy here.
As Mr. Eddie, another phenomenal supporting performance, and then Patricia Arquette returns, although her character had already died, so she's now playing Mr. Eddie's mistress Alice. It's a lot. It's cryptic, it's confusing and convoluted, it requires some thought, some sorting out of the scenes, the characters. It's like a puzzle. All three films of the LA trilogy are to varying degrees, but even without solving the puzzle, which I'm not entirely sure anybody actually has, this is still an amazingly atmospheric, well-acted, creepy, mysterious, and engaging experience. There are some amazing scenes that I'll never forget. Of course, the party scene with Robert Blake being the best, but there's also a scene where Mr. Eddie teaches traffic laws that's just amazing.
Tell him you won't tailgate.
Hammer! Do you know how many fucking car lengths it takes to stop a car at 35 miles an hour? 6 fucking car lengths! That's 106 fucking feet, mister! If I had to stop suddenly, you would have hit me! I want you to get a fucking driver's manual! I want you to study that motherfucker! And I want you to obey the goddamn rules! 50 fucking thousand people were killed on the highway last year because of fucking assholes like you!
In my opinion, the film is a masterpiece. A cryptic, surreal, and almost frustrating masterpiece, but a masterpiece nonetheless. Next up is Mulholland Drive. Several prestigious lists actually place this film among the greatest of all time, and I've seen it called the best film of the 21st century, or at least among the best. It, out of all of Lynch's filmography, is the most acclaimed. It clearly has the best reputation among critics, but also cinephiles. I've heard so many goddamn people say that this is their favorite movie of all time. This and There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson seem to be the most popular #1 picks of my generation of cinephiles. It's foundational, monumental, undeniable. It's ingrained into film buff culture. It's a starting point for people that want to get deeper into film or want to get into avant-garde cinema. And I agree, even though it's not my personal favorite Lynch film, it would certainly be a worthy magnum opus of any director, any artist, honestly. The film is the second entry in the LA trilogy, and it follows Naomi Watts, who plays Betty, as she tries to navigate Hollywood as an up-and-coming actress, while Rita, played by Laura Herring, doesn't remember who she is or where she came from, and Betty attempts to help her figure that out. And there's something about Betty's optimism and wonder contrasted with the dark and ambiguous mystery of Rita's story that works so well for me. There's also this big Hollywood conspiracy involving Betty and Mr. Roque, played by the Arm himself, Michael J. Anderson, that feels very film noir-esque, and the mystery and intrigue just continues getting deeper and deeper until, well, spoiler I guess, the entire narrative of the film switches drastically to an entirely different story with quote-unquote different characters. I won't get too much into the plot details, but it's very ambiguous, and it makes for possibly the best narrative of any Lynch film, maybe the best of all time. Not only the story itself, but the way it's told. Unconventional, non-linear, but also so perfectly. It's really two stories that complement each other and make one big epic story, but also a very personal one. It's hard to explain why or how it works, but it does. It's amazing. It should be studied in film class, which I'm sure it already is. How effortless it feels, how completely natural while also surreal, containing an almost artificial vibe. It contradicts itself. It's an enigma. Not only is the story itself an enigma, a puzzle, like I mentioned with Lost Highway, but the way it's executed is, it's beyond me. It's amazing. I can't even explain it. There's something magical about it, for lack of a better term. There isn't a moment in this film that feels wasted, that doesn't contribute to the overarching narrative. There are, however, so many singular moments in the film that are masterpieces in their own right. The cowboy.
Man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be. Is that something you might agree with?
Sure.
Now, did you answer because that's what you thought I wanted to hear? Or did you think about what I said and answer because you truly believe that to be right?
I agree with what you said. Truly.
What'd I say?
The homeless man behind Winkies. Silencio. The list goes on. They all feel so separate and alienated, like brilliant short films, but the way it all flows together is astoundingly good. I'm just rambling at this point, and I don't feel like I'm actually getting across what I'm trying to say, so let me just go back to something a bit more concrete. The acting is superb. Naomi Watts gives one of the best, most layered performances of all time. Laura Herring is great as well, as is Justin Theroux, who plays probably my favorite character in the film, a director named Adam. The three of them are unbelievably good. The script is great, of course. The editing, the cinematography, the uncompromising ambition of Lynch's vision. It's all so perfect. I should just stop talking. I'm getting nowhere. Just watch it and see for yourself. Now, I'm gonna try to avoid getting quite as passionate about the next two films as I did about Mulholland Drive. It's just difficult to express the emotions evoked in me by a Lynch film, and it'll be even more difficult with this film. Third, we've got Inland Empire, the final entry in the LA trilogy. This is by far Lynch's most difficult film to understand or even appreciate. There's so much going on, so little narrative structure. I could talk about it for hours, but I'll keep it short. The film follows Laura Dern as actress Nikki Grace, who accepts a role in a film, and soon her personality begins to meld with the personality of the character she's playing, Susan Blue, and her entire world, as IMDb puts it, becomes nightmarish and surreal. Sounds very Lynchian, I know. It's a puzzle, as I mentioned with both Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway, but it's true. The film is a puzzle. A difficult puzzle, a puzzle that I have not solved, not entirely anyway, but that's not really why I love it. Well, it is, but comprehending the film is pretty much secondary. What I really love about it is the amazing, terrifying, unrelentingly brutal Lynchian atmosphere that exists in every frame. There's just something so sinister about it, something I can't really point to directly, but Lynch is just so amazing at capturing the disturbing in the ordinary, or the extraordinary in certain cases. It's much less polished than Mulholland Drive. It has a very strong, amateuristic aesthetic that Lynch completely commits to, which I respect. It feels intentionally messy, all in an effort to create an atmosphere, a mood, a general undefinable anxiety. Laura Dern stars and gives her best performance of all time by far. She steals the show. It's a masterpiece of a performance. Justin Theroux is back, but he doesn't have quite as much to do, but he's still a great presence. I mean, he is Kevin Garvey himself.
I'm sitting in the railway station, got a ticket to my destination.
William H. Macy, Jeremy Irons, they're in it in pretty small roles. Grace Zabriskie probably has the best scene of the film near the beginning.
Brutal fucking murder.
There's just so much going on here. Anthropomorphic rabbits voiced by the cast of Mulholland Drive. A phantom that just looks like an ordinary guy, a girl watching TV, prostitutes dancing and disappearing, Polish people. It's a lot to take in, and if you don't like it, it'll certainly be a challenge to convince you otherwise, but I think it's a masterpiece. In some ways, the pinnacle of everything Lynch has done. He is completely unrestrained. It's 3 hours of no holding back Lynchian imagery, atmosphere, narrative, performances. Whether you like it or not, it's truly something special. Alright, 2 left for today. Let's talk about Lynch's masterpiece of a debut, 1977's one of the original Midnight movies, Eraserhead, starring Jack Nance, one of my personal favorite Lynch regulars. And talk about cryptic. This is arguably Lynch's most surreal and impenetrable. It's experimental, by nature difficult to understand. There's a lot of imagery, symbolism, themes. It's almost Tarkovsky-esque. There's a lot less going on than in, say, Lost Highway, which is also very cryptic, but Eraserhead is unique. Unlike anything else Lynch has done, aside from some short films and maybe part 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return. The story is actually relatively straightforward. A man, Henry Spencer, has to take care of his deformed child that he had with the strange and elusive Mary X. That's pretty much it. It's not convoluted. There isn't a huge ensemble or anything. There's nothing really to keep track of, unlike in his LA trilogy. There is, however, a lot of unexplained disturbing imagery and symbolism, double meanings and so forth. The opening sequence exemplifies this. It's not obvious, it is incredibly creative and unsettling and adds to the general ominous atmosphere, but it doesn't obviously contribute to the, again, deceptively simple story. I'm not going to analyze it. If I attempted to do so, I would most likely fail miserably. I have some theories and I've read online about some of the ideas the film allegedly puts forth, but I don't know. Nobody does. I'm not even certain Lynch himself does. To say Eraserhead has no deeper meaning, which I think is probably untrue, but let's just say it for the sake of argument. Okay, there is no meaning to the imagery, no themes, no greater purpose. It's just a surrealist exercise in experimentation and creativity. Like painting, like many art forms, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It can still be great art even if the greater intent isn't understood or even existent. I'm rambling, but the point is, just because you don't get it, doesn't mean you can't respect, enjoy, or even love it. I love this film. I love the creepy set pieces, the industrial atmosphere, the practical effects, the performances, the extraordinary, disturbing Lynchian surrealism, the underrated comedy of it. The scene where Henry has dinner with Mary's family is comedic gold.
Mary usually does the carving, but maybe tonight you'll do it, Henry. All right with you?
It's all masterful, in my opinion. The infamous Lady in the Radiator is one of the most unforgettable movie moments of all time for me, and one of the few scenes that I can say changed the way I view cinema. And that holds true even if it doesn't mean anything. It is just perfect. Just everyone watch this creative masterpiece. Okay, I'll try to talk less about this one. The final film for today's video, The Elephant Man. And this could be the clear magnum opus of a lesser director's filmography. It's practically a masterpiece, or if not damn near close to it. It's also iconic. I think most people have seen it, or at least have a basic understanding of the plot at this point. It's about John Merrick, who suffers from severe physical deformities. He's ostracized, treated terribly, exploited, but finds a friend in Frederick Treves, who attempts to treat him at a hospital as well as connect to him as a human being. It is a touching and emotional film. John Hurt, who plays John Merrick, gives one of the best performances of the 1980s and arguably of all time. It's a rather typical, obvious message about human dignity and looking past a person's exterior, but the film is crafted so impeccably, and the performances by both Hurt and Hopkins, who plays Treves by the way, are so phenomenal that it goes past the superficial and the obvious and reaches the heart of the issue. Lynch has made two films that are noticeably less Lynchian than his others, in that there is a lot more emotion and the emphasis of the film is more so on the people and their performances rather than the narrative and style. And this is one of them, the other being The Straight Story, which I'll talk about in part 2. But this, while being a very human drama, is also very dark, both figuratively and literally, as it is beautifully shot in black and white. And it does have some Lynchian elements. There's a few slightly surreal and offbeat scenes, and while there's optimism and hope, there's also plenty of despair and unpleasantness, but it doesn't distract from the core message whatsoever. The film just puts you in a charitable mood. It bridges understanding. It's tragic, devastating, but also amazing in that it produces generosity and kindness. In a certain way, yeah, it's pessimistic, but there's also a strong optimism there. Now, These life lessons and emotionally fueled stories of redemption or understanding aren't exactly what Lynch is known for, but he's damn good at it. It's an outlier in his filmography. Beautiful, yes, but I personally prefer Lynch at his most creative, with less restraints when he isn't telling somebody else's story but his own. With all that said, it's an incredible movie and I still highly recommend it. Thanks for watching my first ever video for this channel. Constructive feedback would be great. I'm just trying a few things out, trying to see what sticks. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you in part 2, which I hope to get out within a week probably.